Hi everyone, this is John here with another indie creative talk. Basically, we're starting a series this week where we're going to basically talk about how masterminds can really help us all to reach the next level of success. So right now we've got John Duffy who's joined me, and he just came from a weekend with Tony Robbins, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a little soon. Hopefully we'll have George Ohan join us a little bit, and really the idea of this is to talk about what masterminds can or can't do, but also we're ideally going to just start involving folks, and if you're willing to just basically set a goal for next week and stuff. So just to kind of see a little bit about how this all works and everything. So John, maybe we can start off a little bit by talking about how the weekend went for you. I understand it was a great experience and it wasn't your first time.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I was on crew this time. I volunteered and crewed the event, and it was a weekend long event, and includes a fire walk on the first night, Friday night. So the first time I did it was in 1989, back in New York. So and it was an experience at that time that pretty much transformed my life and put me on the path that I am today, with both working in the film industry as a producer, but also, the mindset that I've developed over the years. It kind of created that attitude for me as well.
Awesome. And the experience itself, I know, is really powerful and everything. And you and I, before the show, talked a little bit about how you were able to still connect with other people that formed your masterminds and stuff. What would you say is some of the things that you've gotten out of masterminds? What is it that to you is what a mastermind is about that other things don't provide?
Well, there's a few things I think a mastermind offers. One is it allows people who are like-minded to work together to encourage each other to achieve more results, quicker, faster, and better results, because everybody's kind of holding each other to a higher standard. So that's one thing it does. It allows you to commit to each other so that whatever you're trying to achieve, you're not just saying it, but you're making a commitment, you're making a deadline as to when you're going to achieve it, like you suggested in the beginning of this conversation. And it can be small, it can be big, but it's something that's manageable, practical, and that then you're then going to go out and take the action to achieve it. Because at the end of the day, all of it's about action. You gotta do it, as opposed to just read about it, think about it. You have to take action, otherwise nothing happens. So this kind of puts you in a team that encourages you, but also holds you accountable. So it's an accountability group as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that action is the key. And really, for me, what really works is the idea of having a set, let's say, for instance, we're going to be doing these weekly events and stuff. So for me, to basically say by next week I will have this done, this at least gives you some framework to achieve that. It's because that's one of the things that as well as I do in the film industry and a lot of these artistic industries and stuff, that people talk about, oh, I want to write that book or I want to make that movie, and they never set actual deadlines. Because even though that I think we tend to think of deadlines as kind of constraining and kind of limiting and stuff, but really to me it's a real productivity hack, because different times that's how things get done. If you never set a deadline, sometimes it just never, the deadline or your mental deadline, the one that you kind of your someday, just keeps getting pushed out towards just that, that this day that never arrives and everything. So I definitely agree that the key is having that set time that you're going to be doing something. And the other part is having people that not only hold you accountable, but also really and you and I have talked about that have you really feel supported, where they're rooting for you. And it's that thing of just you and I from the military and stuff like that, have the roots of having the people that are really, got your back, and you feel it, that kind of different times. It may be offering suggestions, or maybe offering ideas, maybe even connections or anything. But just the fact that you really feel that support, I think that's really one of the powers of the mastermind, that nothing else really offers that, whether it's a book or coaching or whatever else. Having that, mutual support and stuff where you're rooting for each other, it's powerful.
Well, anything, like you said, all those things are true. And even in for example, I was working on writing a memoir, and I was part of a memoir group, which is kind of like, you could say, a mastermind that was directed around all of the people in the group were all had similar goals of writing their own memoirs. But every week we would come together and we would have to write a story each week, and then we would read each other's stories and critique them and give each other suggestions and pointers how to improve. But it allowed me to get to a completion that I wouldn't have gotten to any other way, because I had that accountability and we were all having a shared goal of helping each other achieve that. So every week I would come in and make sure that I had my story written, even if I had to write it, the day of, but I had to have it done. And I think we all had that same kind of attitude, and that moved us forward. Where I know if I didn't have that kind of particular type of group, that I would still not have a first draft of the book, and I probably would never get a first draft of the book. So it's really that important and that crucial for many of us to be able to have that support.
So how do you find some of the people, like you talked about kind of from the Tony Robbins events, you found some connections, people with like minds and like goals and stuff like that. Like beyond that, like what are some ways that you've connected with people and really, gelled together to form a mastermind?
Well, once again, when I first came out here in the industry, there was a group that was set up, and we that was basically inspiring people in the film industry to do the same thing. And from that, we had after we took this seminar, we continued as a group to create a mastermind and continue to do that for probably about a year's time, which inspired a lot of us to achieve many of our goals, because it kept us on track and it kept us focused on what we were trying to do. So I did that in the film industry. Obviously, I do that with Tony Robbins in the motivational and the life coaching and the self-improvement field as well. And then in writing, I did it with the memoir group, which was a more specific way of people all trying to accomplish the same thing. So whatever way, and I think that's what you're trying to accomplish here for people, is to find a way to get, and for creatives, it's really hard because, you need that discipline. I worked with, I had the honor and privilege of working with Stephen J. Cannell, who you may know from the A-Team and
absolutely
shows that he wrote. Well, he has a great story because he was dyslexic and he didn't, because he didn't know he had dyslexia until later in life. And he obviously became one of the most prolific writers, but he created a work style. He'd get up at 5 a.m. and he would write to 8 o'clock every single day of his life. And that allowed him to be turn out tons of scripts, tons of books, tons of TV shows, because he created that discipline for himself. And with a lot of us, a mastermind allows us a way to do it if we're not that individually self-directed and self-committed to everything that we do.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that, like how you made the transition, from being a postal worker and stuff to the film industry. That's a huge leap. It's some people can maybe work in some similar industry, like maybe they're in advertising or something like that, but that's a big jump. And I think part of it is to make a big jump and stuff is to develop the connections and the networking and stuff. So like one of the things that I think that's a real challenge though is to just, kind of move in that direction. And I think, if you connect with the mastermind, if it's at least people that like, even if they're not, working full time in the film and entertainment industry, they're at least other people that like are on the same path, that like they're shooting for the same thing. They're looking to kind of, it extends, I think, your reach and also like, your view of the industry, what's going on. I think that's the other part of it, is that having more eyes and ears in what's, going on with whether it's, auditions or it's, production opportunities, or it's just, I think, that much more that you are exposed to beyond your, because we're only one person. We only, can really see what we have. We only have so many hours a day, but then being able to kind of multiply ourselves in different ways like that, I think that's the other part of it. That's really what we benefit from is just, hey, like I saw this article, you might be interested in checking this out, John. And, things like that. That's also to me the added benefit. I think at this point, I want to see if like maybe some folks, I know Greta's on here and stuff like that. If there's questions that like or things we want to talk about, I welcome you to jump on a seat and stuff like that. If you're, if you'd like to, or just simply, type something in the chat box. Either way, I know that Walter's here as well, and yeah, definitely welcome your kind of questions or thoughts or different things you'd like to share. Looks like right. Oh, awesome. Greta is jumping on.
Sorry,
Hey,
I'm
Greta.
having a little internet connection issue down here in Chile. So if
Okay.
I jump off or anything, just for warning.
Yeah.
But hi, and thanks for pulling together. It's
Hi.
good to see you again. Hi, John.
Welcome. Yeah, Greta, maybe you
Go
can share
ahead.
a little bit about your story before because I know something about you, but maybe just for the benefit of John and Walter and anybody else who's watching, like a little bit about what you're working on, and before diving into your question or comments. Yeah.
So I'm Greta, and I'm calling in from southern Chile. I have, let's see, I've spent almost about the last 10 years working in some degree of supply chain consulting. So I work with companies to manage and improve human rights and environmental sustainability issues in factories and farms all over the world. And I've always been really passionate about this work. But all over the years, it's also exposed me to a lot of things that kind of challenge my own ethics and my own ability to do the work and stay positive through it, because you get exposed to a lot of things that are really challenging. So I've had kind of a pattern of taking a break from that work and kind of taking a huge break. So, for example, after working as a manufacturing manager in China, I left the industry and I thru hiked the Appalachian Trail, and I spent 5 months walking from Maine to Georgia. Did a total reset and figured out, that I needed to approach my role in the industry a totally different way. So after that experience, then I moved to San Francisco and got connected with a fantastic firm, started doing consulting work on the ethical strategy, which I loved. But again, I got a little bit too far removed from one of my deepest passions, which is outdoor adventure and being out in wild places and environmental conservation. So after 5 years with that, I again kind of did a full overhaul, sold the big stuff, and moved to Chile with a very, very open kind of plan of, a one-way ticket and give myself time to climb some mountains, surf, and explore, and then re-enter reimagine my role in the industry again, to kind of come at it with a more creative sense. So that's what I'm doing now. I've been in Chile for the past year, and after spending a good chunk of time just enjoying the mountains and the ocean, I've been switching gears into a much more productive and creative mode, where now I'm doing a lot more outreach, and I'm actually bringing a lot of projects that were ideas and dreams into fruition. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. So in terms of doing masterminds and like connecting with others, like who would be your ideal people to connect with? Like what were your, like kind of what you hoping to get from, a mastermind?
Yeah. So for me personally, first, I've always worked with entrepreneurs ever since my father was an entrepreneur. And so I think I started my first business at the age of 12, raising hedgehogs. So I love working with other entrepreneurs first and foremost, whether or not I'm working in a company with them, or I've also done a lot of pro bono work to work with startups for consulting and the type of work that I do. So the thing that attracts me about kind of a mastermind group is to be able to be in a space where there's other entrepreneurs who are thinking in that same kind of risk-taking, but also strategic kind of mindset. And on top of it, I'm now living in an extremely remote part of the world. I have some local projects here, but it's hard to kind of take some of my bigger ideas that are connected to more of my global strategy work forward. So being able to connect with other people who are either building something in that same type of vision for, having local impact, but also really looking forward to having a much bigger global impact. And also just, having that energy of other entrepreneurs who are coming up with kind of crazy ideas and working through how do we make these kind of tangible steps forward to bring that idea into something that's a reality. So, having a more direct group. I've got a professional network, and I've got some great people who I consider to be good mentors and all of that. But I think it's also helpful to connect with other people who are looking for that same type of support,
Yeah.
And also might be at different stages.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is that, like you said, there's other networks for other things and stuff. But to me, a mastermind, how it's not a network is that it's more where you have either similar interests and similar goals. And you have, beyond that, like also some different, ideas and the desire to kind of, support each other in those goals and the different things you're working on and stuff. I think a networking group can be sometimes a little too kind of, all over the place. And I think, a mastermind is where you start focusing on what it is that really you want to work on, whether it's just, even if it's an idea, even if it's something that you're thinking about kind of making more of a reality. I think that's the key, is that like it starts really, putting some of the framework together and taking it from that, nebulous idea into something more concrete.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think it can help too to just have, case studies too, and to be able to draw from each other's experience. For me, I think that's really huge, because I think that way. I always am trying to see what has been done and what exists, and then be able to grow something beyond that. In my work, I've always done that. And so it helps to be able to have other people to dialogue about things like that. And because each of us has different experiences and might have advanced different businesses in different ways, it can really be helpful just to be able to kind of talk through some of those ideas too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just like John was talking about in the film industry and stuff, there's nothing like talking with somebody who's actually making films versus,
Right.
Somebody who's a writer or whatever else. I mean, that's the kind of the part that like really, it's, just becomes that much more valuable to actually, and the other part is, it's not somebody who's like an Oscar-winning director giving, speaking from some platform and stuff. It's somebody who's down in the trenches with you, who may possibly even offer like, that, first cameraman that can actually possibly, for you to at least look at. If not, like then at least they can put you in contact with them, and they may know somebody who can operate your red camera or whatever and stuff. So yeah, definitely having those concrete, parallels, be able to kind of talk in the same wavelength and stuff like that. That's like priceless.
Yeah. Well, especially if you're taking something like one of my projects that I'm doing for this ride in Patagonia, I'm, some areas of this project I'm very well versed in and I'm very experienced in, and it's exercising my expertise. But then there's a whole other range of things that are totally new for me in terms of, production and all of that. So just being able to connect with other resources and pick people's brains, and then have my brain open for the picking as well. I always look for those opportunities too, to be able to just help others. So that's what I would be seeking for, a mastermind. I've never actually been a part of a mastermind before. So. Oh,
interesting. Yeah, I mean, definitely, to me, it's about that thing of looking for ways that you can help each other. It's and that's the thing that, like, if anything, I've actually been in situations where, I've wanted to connect with other folks. Like, in fact, one of the things that really drove me to kind of really start getting more serious about masterminds was, I've mentioned it a few times that I was recently, asked to go through a review copy of a friend of mine who's, publishing his book about speaking and stuff like that. And to just read, like, it was some of the different things he went through, some of the tough times and everything. And, I knew him at those times. I was like kind of, different times attending the same events, and I had no idea that some of the different things he was going through. And I think that's, it just can't be in this day and age. We have all this technology to connect with each other. There's no way we shouldn't, like, especially somebody who, like, I would have helped if I knew what was going on,
Right. Yeah.
And I think different times in like a public setting, you may, not feel as comfortable or as, like kind of, or you just don't want to talk about some of those different things and stuff. But I think a mastermind allows you that kind of, safety, that ability to kind of, that freedom to kind of share some things you wouldn't talk about in a public forum. But then, you would absolutely within your group share and like be willing to kind of be, vulnerable. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Brene Brown's and the power of, vulnerability. And I think that's the thing, that's the other part about all this that we haven't talked about yet, but, having that safety to just, put it all out there as to where you're at and what it is that you really, need and stuff like that. That's huge.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. John is still there, or
I'm here. I'm just listening. I'm in listening mode right now.
I hear you.
Greta's story and some of her experiences are fascinating. I think one of the other benefits, I think, of what you just kind of set up, John, is just that besides us having similar, you get to meet people with rather different and unique perspectives and unique and different experiences. And that enriches us as well. I like the way you put it, Greta, about, being, I forget how you said it, I just forgot, but it was just a way of being open to having your mind expanded as well as expanding others. And it's just a very, and I think that's kind of, just listening to you, it's very different experience than say what I've been involved in, but that's great. It's like all of a sudden your world expands because of the involvement with saying now you become larger and enriched because of somebody else's experience that you haven't had. So that's the other that's so great.
Yeah, I think that's the delicate balance is like kind of, where it is that like you have similar interests and goals and stuff like that, and then where you are different enough to strengthen and kind of help each other. It's like kind of like the whole Mission Impossible team where like one guy is this expert on, picking locks and another one's an expert on, getting past, like kind of the security and stuff like that by disguising themselves, or, it's having those each, what your special superpower is that you bring to the table. That's the other part that really, it just makes you all that much better and stuff like that as a group. So.
Yeah, it's almost like putting together a really good core management team of a company, really, if you think about it. If you can come up with a good mastermind group that has those different components and can support kind of the weakness and strengths of others, then it's interesting to imagine how that can function when everyone's actually growing something independently, but still functioning in that same kind of space of sharing resources for the strengths and weaknesses. I like that.
And also, I think it helps if we commit to holding each other accountable, because that's a lot of what is the challenge sometimes in life is that, people say a lot of things, they're going to do a lot of things, but then they don't do it and they don't take that action. And so having a group that holds you accountable for, you said you were going to do this. Yeah. And what's the story? Why haven't you done it? When are you going to do it? So it gives us that kind of, challenge to make us stay accountable to what our commitments are and our goals and our dreams and everything. So we don't lose focus, but we stay committed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. If you guys are open to it, I would like to offer that, if we, any of us attend, next week or something like that, to just basically, set a goal. And, if anything, I would love to get your input on what it is that I can do to kind of, build on what I'm doing, which is to help people connect, and form their own masterminds and stuff. So I'm definitely, asking and open to, your thoughts and ideas and suggestions and stuff. Because for me right now, I just want to basically, start sharing these, via these discussions on the Blabs. I've been writing, blog posts about it and stuff, and of course sharing it, of course, social media and everything. So I'm definitely game as to, like kind of, ways that I can be held accountable for by next week as to, what I can do to kind of help move things forward.
Hot spot. I should think about it a little bit. Just I feel like it's a little bit new for me. But at the same time, I really like one of the ideas that you had presented on the last blab too, about kind of thinking of how you can create some sort of connections between other individuals so that we know kind of there is somewhere it exists, the strengths and weaknesses and what people are seeking and what people are offering. I don't know in terms of, what network you're drawing from to kind of build the masterminds, or are you just kind of putting it out there and seeing who comes along?
My audience, I was gonna say my audience so far has been like creative entrepreneurs and folks that's in the entertainment industry, or writers, or musicians and stuff. So that's been the folks that I've been kind of blogging for, and also speaking with and stuff like that, and creating content for. Yeah. So that's like where I'm going to basically, and that's why I definitely invited John, and then some of the other folks from that industry and that like arena and stuff like that. What I did was kind of, in fact, I just put up the link and stuff like that. I created a form that basically people can put some basic information and what it is that they're looking for. And to just basically, that's my first kind of draft, if you will, at starting this process of helping people do matchmaking. Cool. So that's kind of
Okay, I like that. I see that. Awesome.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing, John. I mean, I've done masterminds before, and just coming out of this weekend, I'll probably be involved in other masterminds with people. And Greta, I don't know when you came on, but we were talking about. I just did a seminar with Tony Robbins, and I've done it many, many times before. But I crewed it this year. So after that, there's probably a mastermind that I'll be involved with that tribe and that group of people. But just as to make it, off the top of my head, thinking what would be the suggestions for you, I rather would want to think about it a little and maybe then send you an email with some more, rather than off the top come up with the things that
no worries.
And then going back to your first point, then the question is just what could we commit to if we're going to show up next week, something that we can commit to, and maybe we can do that, and then use that as a way to make a commitment and then achieve that by next week. And then at the same time, send you further information on our ideas on the mastermind so that we can then kind of flesh it out a little bit more.
Yeah, I definitely want to, kind of help you to achieve, that's something that will move things forward. And here, one of the books that's been influential for me recently has been The One Thing by Gary Keller. It's the idea that, we often talk about 20% of our efforts getting 80% of our results. And he's talked about when you narrow that down even more and stuff like that, it really gets down to one thing. And so that's why, like, my goal with Masterminds is to help people have that kind of clarity for each week. What is that one thing that's going to really move you forward, for whatever it is that you're trying to do? And that's, I think, kind of what, the real power of it is, like, kind of getting it down to, like, because there's many different things that we can do and, like, many different things we feel that we want to get done. But some part of us knows is that, like, just that one thing, and often it's that one thing that we're not comfortable with, or that's kind of, like, really pushes our abilities, like, kind of, and that's that thing that, like, I'll have to see if I can dig up that one drawing I came across, but it's like that thing of where, you have your comfort zone and then, like, a big globe of, where the magic happens. And that's really, I feel like, so true, though. And, from what you've shared, Greta, I definitely know that you're very comfortable with, like, being uncomfortable. And that's awesome.
I tend to jump into the discomfort when I'm getting too comfortable. But that I still have those things that I end up seeing that I'm procrastinating. And that's also when I realize, oh, that's actually the key. That's what I'm supposed to be really digging into. So I definitely am needing that degree of accountability too on a couple of things, especially right now with just real quick, John Duffy, the other project. John, you know a bit about this, but I'm going to be doing a 2-month horse trek through Patagonia, January and February, and I'm doing it self-supported with my husband and our 2 dogs and our horses, and that's it. Camping the whole way. And my intention is to actually, the purpose of the trip is to celebrate simplicity and inspire curiosity. So rather than working with brands to have them sponsor me with new products, with the hope of supporting a conscious consumer and a curious consumer, I'm going to actually be working with the brands to tell the story of the things that I already own. So I'm asking them to sponsor transparency in their supply chain and kind of take me back through the history of all of the things that I own and that I'm going to carry with me on the ride. And so there's a whole slew of kind of vulnerable aspects of this trek that go beyond me, also for these companies, and as well as for this idea of starting a movement of curious consumers and people who are asking more questions when it comes to why we buy what we buy, where it comes from, and where's it going to go when we're done with it. And so for me, it's like this whole big thing because it's a little bit of everything of my whole life that's gotten to this very point. So it feels very big, but then also I've spent space with it to give it space so that there's intention there, but there's not expectation, just in case it doesn't, turn out to be a whole big thing, and that's okay too. It'll be a grand adventure. So I'm in a pivotal moment in terms of producing a lot of things and the brand outreach and all of that. So yeah, having some, other minds to be able to talk through some ideas and share things with is definitely a helpful thing for me at this moment personally.
So what would be one thing that would really kind of help that project along by next week? I mean, a week isn't, in some degrees, not much time, and at the same time, again, having that kind of fixed focus, really can really, especially identifying one thing that makes the other parts kind of fall more into place and stuff. I think that's the other part that's key. Yeah,
for me, it's definitely having the conversation with at least one of the brands. So I've just begun the initial outreach. Awesome. And I've gotten materials, but some of the materials are not 100% done. So I have to finish that. I've got to basically have the whole concept packaged because it's multifaceted. So before next week, that's my thing. That needs to be whole, and those conversations need to be initiated. That's going to be big for me because that's the next phase. That's taking it beyond me and my idea,
I think that's a great goal, just having, like you said, one conversation. Yeah. Here's the thing that I kind of see as and I'm sure you're aware of it, is like the different pieces that you said, maybe kind of what will be kind of cause you to kind of go, well, maybe I'll just, get these other things done and then have that conversation. So here's something I would offer is that what could be, that MVP, right? That minimum viable product for your package to have that conversation. Just enough to kind of where, at least you have something to kind of beta, have that beta conversation with that first conversation and stuff.
Yeah, I love it. That's perfect. That's good. I know that's what I need to do. That's the inner perfectionist in me that's kind of no, it has to be perfect or else they're not even going to want to talk to you. But at the same time, it's I'm most comfortable when I get in front of these people and I actually know how to have the conversation and I can probably tell them more about the products than they can tell me in some cases. But so anyway, it's part of that, just getting over, well, it's okay. It doesn't all have to be baked. It can be a half-baked cake. So thank you. I like that, the MVP, the minimum viable product. Great.
How about you, John? What right now, is your big thing that really that you're working on that really is the big project that really helps you move further to the different things you want to achieve?
Well, the most important thing, it's going to be a crazy month for me, and it's just kind of off, you're doing this ride through Patagonia. I got a movie that's going to be at the Equus Film Festival in New York that we did called A Sunday Horse, about horse jumping. So just in the horse world. But so I'm heading to New York in November to do the film festival there. We're going to be the main film in the festival. And then I have a couple of other film projects coming up, taking me to Trinidad. So but all that I pretty much got handled. That's all part of what I do, and I don't even need to worry about. But my biggest my biggest challenge is writing and rewriting in particular. I was mentioning to you, John, in that memoir writing group, I wrote a first draft of a memoir, and now I need to go in and really rewrite it and put in some serious work. And it's the one thing that I resist the most, because I'm a very social person. I'm always out there with people, and that's what I do the easiest. And sitting and writing by myself is not exactly the most enjoyable thing for me. And yet it's something that I have a burning desire that I have to complete this project because it has meaning, and I need to share these stories with the world, because the stories, the experiences I've been through have been rather unique. And so that's my thing. And so the way to do it is finding a way to commit every day to a half hour of writing to start. And then I'm going to, of course, step it up later down the road, but at least start there. So I'm committed to that on a daily basis. So I start to build that habit up again, because it's the only way I'm going to get to a completion is if I make it part of my daily experience. Otherwise, given all the things I got going in the film world, it's just going to, it'll just get pushed to the side. I have too much things taking my time and commitments.
Can I offer a plant a seed of an idea?
Of course.
So one of the things I've talked about different times is, like kind of the idea of investing a few hours in it's not a thing of, basically replacing, like, one of the things about time management, all that they talk about is like, choosing, the big rocks, and, we've all heard that and stuff like that. But here's the thing that, like, recently an idea is that somebody came to me with this idea of creating time. And one possible way of creating time is, like, if your strength is like to get out there, to talk, be out and about, stuff like that, maybe the answer isn't for you to kind of spend more time on something that's not as much of strength of yours. In fact, if it's something that, like, really, you don't enjoy and stuff like that. And I'm not talking about writing, which, really to a degree, like, you're writing, especially if it's a memoir, you're writing your story and stuff. But what about finding an editor, somebody who their core specialty is taking what you've written and turning it to, the memoir that you really envision and stuff like that. So in other words, somebody to kind of help you to shape that to what you really want. And of course, that takes time. But here's the thing, though, like, one of the things I realized with this idea of, like, time creation is that, like, let's say you spend, 150 minutes, right, and stuff, roughly a little under 3 hours and everything. And that time invested saves you, even if it's like that half hour, like a week or whatever stuff. And let's say like that half hour, weeks would normally run like for months and everything like that. Now multiply it back. So for that 150 minutes, now you've gotten back, let's say just, 6 months times 4 weeks, 24 times half an hour, roughly, at least a dozen or so hours. So for those couple hours, you got back a dozen or so hours by getting somebody else that kind of you've helped to basically make clear your vision and everything like that. So do you see what I'm kind of getting at is like the idea of like leveraging somebody else and somebody else's effort to kind of, and I know, different times there's costs and all these other things and stuff like that. But I'm just saying that just as an idea, just as a way to kind of like leverage your time and resources to kind of create more time for yourself to do the things that you really thrive at and stuff.
No, I think that's a good idea. And I have went down that path a couple of times attempting to create that. And I think it's worthy of continuing to go down that path. I had someone who was going to work with me as a co-writer and editor who has had obviously a lot more experience on that side and a lot more skill in that field. And we got close and it just never happened. The person made a lot of promises, but I think their desire was bigger than their ability to produce time-wise. And then they would, they'd hit the wall and then they come up with excuses that they didn't have the time. And it's like, and obviously I understand that, but that's not obviously the person that's going to do it with me. I thought I had that and it fell apart. So I'd like to put that back together. So I do take that idea, and I think that's a good idea. So I appreciate you raising that and putting it back on the table for me.
Yeah, sure. I think that's the part that's tricky sometimes. It's like, we go one route and stuff, and then like it just didn't work out with that person, like you said, and stuff like that. But it doesn't mean that it necessarily isn't the right way. It's just like that just wasn't the right person and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think at this time this has really been a great session, stuff like that. Right now, we'll just plan on having it next week. I think for me, the commitment will be to basically, see, kind of talk to at least a few other people, possibly Walter. I'll see about connecting with you, and like he was interested in kind of participating next week as well and stuff. I just, I think for me, it's like just getting more feedback as to, what it is that like I can do to kind of really make this, something that like folks, not only the lab itself, but also as something that I can do to kind of help connect folks to create, their masterminds and stuff like that. So I think that's right now what I see is like kind of my goal is at least have one conversation as, like Greta and stuff. And, basically I think that's where I'm going to move things forward for for what I'm doing. And unless anybody has anything else to, kind of that they would like to discuss or like kind of, I think we'll just plan on meeting again next week about the same time.
Yeah, that would be great. And thank you. Yeah.
Works for me. And thanks, John, for setting it up. And Greta, pleasure meeting you. And, I love your energy and all the stuff that you're doing. So I got a feeling I'll be learning a lot. So that's very cool.
Likewise. I'm excited for the next conversation. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time, guys.
The same.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Great week too.